Joining us now from our bureau in New York City, former FBI agent, Navy SEAL, federal air marshal, and New York Times bestselling author, Jonathan Gilliam. Jonathan, a lot of moving parts over this weekend. We just named those two different attacks, very similar in nature, but once again in two different countries. What's your take on what we saw last Friday?
Well, I don't think it's anything new. I think looking at this from a tactical perspective, I think these jihadists have figured out an attack that they can use that is going to create tremendous media buzz and in certain cases get enough loss of life to put fear into the public.
What would you like to see police in London do differently? I mean, you say that they should be ready to engage these suspects in a much more aggressive way. Is that it, or do you think that there's more that they should be doing as well?
You have to step up your patrols in that area with armed law enforcement. And the response should be aggressive and it should be decisive. And when somebody shows up to that location and pulls a knife, they should be killed and the area should be cleared until a bomb tech clears that body. But the way that it appears is that they just went back to business as usual, and that is why this was able to happen again, along with this nonsense of thinking that they can reprogram somebody's mind from an ideology and then put them back into the same neighborhood where they came from. It doesn't work with drug dealers. It doesn't work with gang members. It's certainly not going to work with somebody who is spiritually and ideologically driven to do these things. And it's ridiculous for them to actually believe that any of this stuff is going to work. You can't just turn a blind eye on it, because we see what the result is. People die.
It seems to be happening all over parts of Europe, but especially in London. Why is that? Do we have any inference as to why there's all of a sudden this uptick in knife attacks in London?
Well, they took guns away. That's one reason. I think it's probably a little harder to get the guns. But on the black market, these individuals are going to be able to get guns no matter what. I think that they're doing these knife attacks because, for one, it is an up-close and personal attack. When you shoot somebody, a lot of times there's minimal visible damage to a body. With these knives, it is a brutal attack. And I think that the attackers are looking for that type of a message to send. But again, I got to point this out. Here is the biggest thing with this, is that you cannot just assume that this stuff is going to stop. When you pass laws, you can't assume that the bad guy is going to follow those laws. They're going to maneuver and change their tactics and techniques to maneuver their way through the lack of awareness and the rules and regulations and policies that are put out there by politicians. Law enforcement has to forward think this nonsense of trying to figure out the kinder, gentler way to solve these problems without thinking about the aggressive stance. It just doesn't work. We need to realize that these people are bent on killing. And you have to have an equal response, and even before the response, you have to pre-think these things and actually say, this is a possibility. That is the number one thing. Threat assessments. Threat assessments in locations, for soft targets, schools, popular places. Pre-think how these individuals are going to do it, because they're not rocket scientists. They're killers.